name's Richard Eckhart from the University of Melbourne. I'll be chairing the webinar today. Just to introduce the webinar itself, this is the 7th and final webinar of the Forewarned is forearmed project series for 2020. The focus of today's webinar is an overview of the community of practice work and the extension work, so what we call work package 4, which you'll hear from Russell later. So we're hearing from a number of the project participants, Russell Patterson, Graham Anderson, Dale Gray and Kate Finger, all telling us about what they've been doing in what we call work package 4. As I said, afterwards we'll then go to a panel session that includes a broader selection of the project team. Just an introduction to the Forewarned is forearmed. Extreme events and climate variability amongst some of the largest drivers of agricultural production, or limitations in some cases. The Forewarned is forearmed project is funded under round 3 of the federal government's Rural R&D for Profit program. It encompasses industry and research collaborations between 8 research corporations, research providers, being the University of Melbourne, Bureau of Meteorology, University of Southern Queensland, Monash University, state governments in Victoria, South Australia and Queensland, and the Birchip Cropping Group. The collaboration between the team includes working directly with farmers, advisors and agribusiness, and seeks to equip producers with information, risk strategies and forecasts of extreme climate events from weeks to seasons ahead, with the aim of decreasing their economic, social, environmental impact. We're now at about the midpoint in the Forewarned is forearmed program, so a good time to review where we've got to with the messages that are going out. So I'll introduce the speakers, I think we agreed, Kate, you would go first, was that right?
Yep, that's correct, Richard.
That was a decision we made just a few seconds before we started. So I'll introduce each speaker as they begin to speak, so that gives them time to display their screen. So Kate, I'll stop sharing and then I'll introduce you while you share your screen.
Yep.
So Kate Finger is an agronomist, developing graduate working program with the Birchip Cropping Group, and assisting in research operations and overseeing the Forewarned is forearmed work package 4 activities from BCG. These involve a regular community of practice meetings, which Kate coordinates on behalf of Forewarned is forearmed. And I'll leave it, Kate, to you to detail what you've been doing. Thank you.
Great, thanks for the introduction, Richard, and good afternoon, everyone. So like Richard said, I work with the Birchip Cropping Group, and as part of the Forewarned is forearmed project, I manage, organise and facilitate a community of practice. So in my presentation today, I'm going to go over a little bit about what a community of practice is, how it functions, some of the people that are involved with the group, and give you a bit of an idea of some of the topics that we've discussed over the last year, and some feedback from participants and what they've enjoyed about being involved. So I'll just go to the next slide. So what is a community of practice, or a COP? It's a group of willing practitioners with a common sense of purpose who agree to work together to solve problems, share knowledge, cultivate best practice, and foster innovation. It's a group who aims to improve collaboration, derive greater value from existing expertise and resources, to improve the flow of science to advisors and farmers, our end users, and to create new and more open discussion channels. So the Forewarned is forearmed community practice has had an interesting history. It actually started up during the Rural R&D for Profit seasonal forecasting project back in 2016, 2018, when that project was running. It started with 16 founding members, and by the end of that project, it grew to 70. When that project ended, the community of practice then became funded under the Forewarned is forearmed project, and is going to continue on until 2022 when the project ends, and then after that we'll see. But currently we've got a member base of 146 attendees, and this has just been growing organically through existing member connections, recommending various people to come on board. So who's involved in this community practice? So it's people passionate about helping Australia's agriculture industries make better, manage the impacts of extreme events better, and to make better use of seasonal climate forecasting. We have members from across Australia, across all agricultural industries, involved in all steps of the development process. So from researchers, advisors, extension and communication providers. They're from federal and state departments, grower groups, research development corporations, universities, TAFEs, private companies, and more recently, we've had a number of participants who are part of the Forewarned, forearmed industry reference groups. And so each month, we typically have an online meeting with a range of topics. Generally, each month they're around a particular theme, and it's a great opportunity for people from across Australia and across the different industries to come together to see and hear about various projects, tools and research that's been happening. It might be relevant to their particular industry, so they get to jump on and hear what's going on. Or for others, it's just simply finding out what's going on in other areas and whether it's relevant or could be applicable to different industries. So it's really great for that information being relayed from both ends. So just to give you an example of some of the topics that we've gone through this year, they're sort of grouped into 3 main themes. So we've covered a number of different tools and resources that are either available for the end users to utilise, that being farmers or advisors, or they're under development and seeking feedback or to be released very soon. So we've looked at things like Wine Australia's Climate Atlas. We've had a bit of a demonstration of a new visualisation and mapping tool for climate change projections in Victoria. We've had an introduction to a tool that's been developed up in northern New South Wales, Ag360, which was formerly known as Ask Bill, that some of you might be aware of. We've had an introduction to the extreme weather events tool that was developed up in Western Australia and looked at the weather station network over there. We also provide, it's a platform so people can update the group on various projects and their outcomes. So we've looked at a range of projects that's happened up in Northern Australia with the grazing industries. We've had some reports about the prediction of extreme rainfall events, a recent paper that was released and we got the outcomes of that. We've also had Christine talked about comparing seasonal climate models from around the world. But probably perhaps most importantly in the terms of the project updates, it's providing a platform for the Forewarned from experimental products to be able to let a huge range of people know about what's currently being developed, if there's any feedback that I'd like to provide to further improve these products, and just getting the knowledge out there of what's actually being developed as part of this project. We also have quite a few interest pieces which have rolled around things like the risk of extreme events impacting Australia's biosecurity. Sometimes they're quite topical. For example, recently we just explored La Ninas because we're currently in one. We've had a producer panel as well, which was really interesting to hear about their perspectives about seasonal forecasting and how to make on-farm decisions. And a lot of these topics are actually suggested or come recommended from people who are part of the community practice who would like to hear more information about a certain topic, or it's some of the research that they're currently working on and I'd like to get the word out there some more. And so just a bit of participant feedback that we've received from a survey that was conducted a couple of years ago by a former colleague of mine who looked after the community practice before me. These are just some of the quotes that people provided about the value and the benefit they got from being part of such a group. So things like they got better awareness and understanding of projects and products that were being developed, and helped with being able to spread the word due to the raised awareness. They could hear and ask questions if they weren't sure, and it was also a great networking opportunity for them. So that about concludes my presentation, but if you're interested in being involved, please feel free to drop me an email. and more than happy to see you come on board to the community practice.
Great, thanks, Kate. And we'll come back to you during the question and answer session. But if Graham and Dale, you could share your presentation, I'll introduce you. So the next two speakers will be a double act, I believe, Dale and Graham. So Graham Anderson and Dale Gray from Agriculture Victoria Services. Dale is an agronomist and Graham a climate specialist with Agriculture Victoria, and between them undertaken the Forewarned is Forearmed work package 4 work together in collaboration with Melbourne Uni and with BCG. You've heard from them a fair few times, I would imagine, but Graham and Dale, great to hear from you, a summary of your work under work package 4 under Forewarned is Forearmed. I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. And Dale's got the slides up. So just a quick overview. AgVic, we've got a range of climate development extension work happening across the state. So Dale runs the Break newsletter and has over 4,000 subscribers to that, which is monthly updates on seasonal forecasts. And we've got our own climate webinars. But we do turn up at over 100 events a year, helping service providers and farmers make sense of climate. So it was a great opportunity to link in with the Forewarned Forearmed project to provide basically a bit of a chance to test some of these products with farmers and have feedback in. So that's been great to link in with all that activity. So Dale, Dale and I've been including some of these products in our yarns around the place.
Thanks, Graham. That's right. So we had very little to talk about really until November 2018, and since that time. We've spoken at 94 different engagements to over 4,500 people, a reasonable split between both farmers and advisors. Most of those talks we've been invited to talk on climate change and or our seasonal climate updates. And so that's it's less than half of the total talks that Graham and I have done that we've had an opportunity to fly the Forewarned is Forearmed flag. Interestingly, I've only had 2 talks where I've been asked to speak on actual extremes, and that was once with the Victorian Sale Yard Managers Association, and the other one was with a land care group in Central Victoria who was doing a project on shelter belts. The way I normally incorporate the Forewarned Forearmed material into my work is when I'm giving my seasonal climate updates. People may or may not know that I put out a newsletter once a month that summates a range of different climate models from around the world, and you know, all the work that goes into those computer models comes out with a few words describing what the model's sort of predicting, and so that's in this line here. So here's the access model here with a forecast of slightly wetter, and that's where I bring in these decile bars from the Forewarned Farm project, because no other product I've found describes in such beautiful detail actually what that dumbed down prediction of a wetter forecast actually means. And so it presents here the fact that this is our quintile or decile bar here, where history says you've got the 20% chance of decile 1, 2, and 5, 6 in the middle, and decile 9 and 10 at the end. And then you've got the forecasts from Access coming out. And for most people, this is the penny drop moment. They really didn't know that there were 99 runs going into that forecast, and that all of them are plausible, and that they all come out with a spread of values, such that the forecast isn't saying wetter, it's saying a higher probability of wetter. But all the other options on the table, it's just the probabilities that have changed. And so for me, the use of this quintile bar here has just been fantastic to be able to explain that so succinctly, and I think it's been a fantastic thing. So out of the 30 different products that are on that website, this is the one that I've been going to most often. And of course, occasionally I sort of show people the story of how this different data is presented. And of course, so up in the top corner there, this is the official sort of forecast, our above and below median. There's a really high chance of wetter there, but on the obverse, there's a lower chance of drier. And then this is the tertile distribution, which most of the world's agencies put out. It's probably my personal favourite. It takes a bit more explaining, but we know that people get this one wrong enough. So putting an extra third from a binomial to a tertile distribution probably increases the complexity as well. But at least it brings you in the chance of having normal weather and climate, or average, or the neutral forecast here, as opposed to just wetter and drier. And of course, the beauty of that quintile forecast is it just brings out, once again, the detail. Well, this is saying it's going to be wetter than the average. This is saying it's likely to be in the wettest third of records. And this is saying, well, it's actually pretty likely to be in decile 9 and 10. So each just builds on a little bit of extra information there. Back to you, Graham.
Thanks, Dale. Yeah, so I think one of the things with a lot of the extension stuff is that, you know, farmers are used to the weather forecasts and out to the week, and but once you get beyond that sort of weather forecast, how far do you trust multi-week or seasonal forecasts? So part of it is just making sure and explaining that, well, actually no one knows exactly what will happen in the future, and beware of anyone who tells you they can, and that's not just the same for weather and seasons, that's the same for markets and prices and Aussie dollar and everything else. But we do know that the models, depending on what's happening with some of the patterns and the physics of those models, they can give us some insights in some situations when there's something brewing. So I guess what's been really useful with this project, and on the left is the sort of traditional percentage chance of above or below median rainfall map, and this is going, say, to July last year, and a drier outlook. And so it's interesting when we talk with producers, you look at the map and there's a percentage of people that will say, jeepers, it lock in dry. But it's really interesting, and as Dale said, when you bring out the same forecast data, and they're just spread across the run of, you know, decile 1 to 2s or decile 9 to 10s, it's really as Dale says, a penny drop moment there for a lot of people, saying that, okay, so all of those are plausible. We're just saying that given the way the oceans and atmosphere and everything's set up, there is an increased chance of drier. But, you know, 23 of the 99 model runs landed in average rainfall. And that's really important when people are framing their decision making, because I know, say, for some farmers in Western Victoria, you know, 1 or 2 rain events last year made the difference. And that could be one of your most lucrative years from a farm business point of view ever. So you don't want to be shutting the gate on the upside just because, you know, so one map on the left saying, you know, it looks like it's going to be dry. This way of sort of showing the data in a different way can be really valuable, just to say, yeah, well, the increased risk is there for drier, but, you know, we keep the door open here because, you know, if we get that rain, this is a year to make hay while the sun shines. So I think that's been the most valuable bit of those discussions. And the next slide, Dale, I think different discussions people are having, and this is what's been good with some of the products, is just showing the same data in a different way. So rather than just the percentage chance of above or below median, a lot of farmers say, you know, we're okay with years that are between decile 7 or decile 3, but tell us about the tails. You know, we want to know, you let us know when there's an increased chance of being in decile 1 or 2. And so here's a Forewarned forearmed product from last year, just sort of looking at that September outlook and just showing, you know, normally there's a 20% chance of decile 1, 2, but it was sort of showing, gee, at that particular time, there's regions there which has over a 40 or 50% chance of being in decile 1, 2. That's certainly just saying, listen, pay a bit more attention here to a short spring. So that's what's been fascinating. The same data, but just shown in different ways. And here's one which is a multi-week forecast, and you can see on the left is sort of recent observations, and it's the average for each week. And you can see what's in grey there in the shading is what you'd normally expect based on history. But the forecast, this is just another way of doing it, and this is looking at temperature, and it's just showing the spread of the models, basically. So, and you can see there for week 1, You know, sometimes that there are some situations where the model's particularly concentrated in warmer than average or cooler than average. And for growers, for some growers, that could be a really valuable way of seeing that information, especially if you're trying to work out when one particular fruit crop or something might be coming in and you can see some warmer weeks ahead. So I like the way that it's showing the spread of observations. And this is another example, a test product with forearmed, which is just showing it's the heat and cold plume for the next 30 days. So it shows the spread of all of the model runs, but the top line is basically anything above that in the orange is where some of the model runs have gone into the warmest 10% of years. And the lower line is, you know, anywhere where model runs have gone below the coldest 10% of years. So it's just part of that early flag. There is no certainty of what will happen once you get beyond, you know, week one, but this is a good way in these different products here to try and flag that, you know, at a different time, some of the models have good reason to be skewing one side or another, and it's starting to give us a bit of early warning, which is about what's useful with this sort of stuff is it can flag it a few weeks out, but then you watch it change over a couple of days to see if that's actually getting bigger or if it might go away. But so that's what's been some pretty good stuff in there. So I guess we've enjoyed being part of this sort of national framework, linking up the climate science and forecasting researchers and the different industries. It's been great, and the community of practice that Kate's been running for Birchip there, that's been really terrific, getting people working together and sharing tips and tools of the trade. And I guess a lot of the time when we come across dealing with climate risk in ag, we're talking about the three key things, like we're needing improved forecasts, whether it's with weather, multi-week or seasons, and this project's certainly looking at doing that. There's also a lot of work in terms of making sure we understand forecasts, because there's, you know, billion-dollar impacts from the weather on agriculture, and so understanding how we use it and apply them. But also a key bit, though, is about, well, in the end, what do people do with it, and the decisions made. So what tactics and practices and tools people have to manage risk on farm. So a lot of work there, and for some of that stuff, you don't even need a forecast. It's just things that farmers do that helps better manage climate risk. But that's our challenge. And I guess one of the things in the design of the project originally, because the extension component of this overall project, it isn't large. It's basically the key effort, and a lot of design's gone into the project, and there's farmer reference groups and a lot of industry people having input into the development of the products. But the key premise was that if the user design and the product design here is around users' needs and farmers' needs, if that's done well, as these new products appear, they will fly off the shelf, because nothing spreads faster than a good sort of climate or forecast tool in agriculture. So stay tuned for the next year or two of the project, because that's really what will be available to everybody, some of these products. So I'm going to leave it there, I think. Dale, anything else?
No.
Good
work.
Great. Thanks, Dale. Thanks, Graham. Good overview, and I'm sure there'd be a few questions we could pose to you soon about that. So the next speaker is Russell Patterson, who's the National Coordinator of the Forewarned is Forearmed project. Russell, if you can put up your presentation in the meantime. And so Russell's the coordinator. He keeps us all honest. And but Russell's also a producer, and from that point of view, and a consultant within the ag industry. So, you know, Russell, I think you'd take an interest in what's coming out of this project from more than just one perspective. Hand over to you, Russell, to give us the overview of the program.
Thanks very much, Rich, and thanks also to Kate, Dale and Graham for their presentation. And yes, Rich, I actually, we're using the climate graphs in relation to hay cutting this year, and found them very good. Look, I just want to give a really quick overview of the program as a whole, and just some, I guess, some observations about where we are in terms of progress. Whoops. Oh, great. Now I can't seem to get my screen to move, Rich. This is bad.
Okay.
Sorry.
Rich, you might be able to request remote control of Russell and drive it for him.
Let's see. All right.
I don't quite understand what's happened. Can I just try again?
Yeah, just try resharing your screen. There it comes.
No.
Okay.
We did say that if it all went bad. Rich, I'll just try to. I don't understand.
Try to share it again, because it came up and then it disappeared.
Yeah, I might just leave it off full screen mode. I beg your pardon, everybody. My apologies about this. Can I just leave it on that?
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Okay, so I'll just give an outline of an overview of the Forewarned Forearmed project as a whole, progress to date, and next steps. As Kate, Graham, and Dale indicated, extreme events and climate variability are really big drivers of farm profitability. That's one of the reasons this is an important project. I've got to say also, I'm very lucky that I'm the national coordinator of this project, because not only do I get to work with a lot of really good people, but it's at some cutting edge research development and adoption areas as well. As people have said, a lot of people use 1 to 7 day forecasts for extreme events, but we're really limited in the amount of information on events in the weeks or seasons, extreme events in the weeks or seasons ahead. The whole overview of this, or aim of this, is to provide forecasts of extreme events. So, high or low rainfall, extreme heat, extreme cold, frosts, etc. And the purpose of that is to decrease the economic impact that might occur as a result of that. The final component is in terms of developing associated risk management tools for the industry. My apologies. Who are our partners? As Rich indicated at the start, we've got 8 or 9 RDCs, a number of universities, a number of state government agencies, Birchip Cropping Group, and of course, most importantly, the Department of Agriculture, Water and Environment through their Rural R&D for Profit program. This next slide indicates just the scope and the broad coverage that we've got. These dots for the various sectors indicate the stations, the Bureau of Meteorology stations, that you'll be able to click down into for various products to get extreme event forecasts. So it's not just a picture of a map of Australia, but you'll be able to drill down into your own specific locations for some of the products. What are the outputs and outcomes that we're seeking? Well, obviously, we're seeking an improved understanding of the industry's needs in relation to extreme events, and we've been doing that a couple of ways, which I'll get to in a minute. Increased understanding of the drivers of extreme events, and that's the work being done by the Bureau and also Monash University in particular. We'll end up with new products that'll give us an improved ability to predict extreme events with acceptable confidence intervals. And of course, through the work that Kate, Dale and Graham have done, increased awareness and use of those extreme event forecasts, but also of some of the risk management tools that I'll touch on in a minute. And the purpose of it, the outcome we're seeking to achieve, is just giving farmers better opportunities to manage and prepare for extreme events, hopefully resulting in economic, environmental and also social benefits. Please don't try to interpret all of this graph. The key message I wanted to get across here is that there's 4 work packages. Work package 1 down below is predominantly the university and predominantly Bureau and Monash University. They're looking at user needs initially, and then how can we improve the forecast going forward? What are the key drivers of these extreme events? Work package 2 is the Bureau again, and that's the development of the new products, the forecast products coming forward. Work package 3 is University of Melbourne, SARDI, USQ and QDAF, looking at interfacing with industries. So working with the Northern red meat industry, the southern red meat industry, the grains industry, the dairy industry, the wine industry, etc., and having a reference groups being able to put input into the extreme event products that have been developed in Work Package 2. And then Work Package 4 we've heard about today. So just a quick snapshot now of what progress we've made. In Work Package 1, right at the start, the user needs were identified, and that's been ongoing through the industry reference groups that I'll refer to in Work Package 3. We now have increasingly better understanding of some of the drivers of extreme events, and an example is the sudden stratospheric warming in 2019, which the Bureau identified, and the impact on Eastern Australia, which in a large amount made people like Harry Hendon and others almost global rock stars, because it was so interesting around the world and a really important phenomenon. Work Package 2, a huge number of experimental forecast products have been developed by Deb Hudson and her team. These have then been exposed to industry for feedback. The first operational product will be launched on the Bureau of Meteorology website in March or April of next year. Work Package 3, again, further understanding producer needs and what are the really key extreme event issues that the dairy industry or the wine industry or the red meat industry really wanted to focus in on. Then there's the interaction with the industry reference groups, of which we have 6, exposing the experimental products to them and getting feedback from grassroots producers about those particular tools. That's been fed back into Work Package 2. And there's also been the development of risk management packages in relation to extreme events. And one of the really important development by Peter Heyman and the team has been the development of a rapid climate decision analysis tool, which has been the subject of discussion in a previous webinar. And then, of course, we've got the Work Package 4 with Kate's community of practice, Dale and Graham, the general extension through Ag Victoria, but also other forearmed partners have been active in the extension and communication space. What are the next steps? Well, through Monash Uni and the Bureau, we're going to continue to explore the drivers of extreme events so as to increase our knowledge and understanding there. As I mentioned, the first operational product will be listed on the Bureau's website around about March, April, we hope. The second and third operational products have been selected, and the Bureau will now start to operationalise those as well, so that they can be products available on the website. We'll continue to road test other experimental products that are coming through, doing it with the industry reference groups through Work Package 3, etc. Continue to develop risk management products, and as I mentioned before, the rapid climate decision one, and then also further ramp up extension and communication. We recently had a midterm review done on Forewarned is forearmed, which was part of the contractual arrangements with the federal government, but also just because we wanted to make sure we're on track. One of the recommendations coming out of that is that as we start to get some of these products operationalised on the Bureau's website, that we need to continue the extension and communication that Kate, Dale, Graham and others have been doing. For anybody who would like to make contact in relation to the community of practice, there's Kate's email address. If you want to more information about FWFA, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. And I've also listed Deb as a contact at the Bureau in relation to experimental products. So, Rich, that pretty well covers me. Thanks very much, everybody, for listening.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Russell. Good overview. And if I can invite the rest of the panelists to join us, so it'll be the speakers that have just presented, but also Deb Hudson and Harry Hendon, the 2 scientists from the Bureau of Meteorology that are working on Work Package 1. So that's Deb and the rock star that Russell mentioned, Harry. and Peter Heyman from SARDI. Welcome, Peter. So we've got a fairly full panel here, if you have any questions, anyone who's attending, please type them into the Q&A box, and I'll pick them up from there. So we'll get into the questions. I thought I'd start with Dale and Graham. Deciles. There's been a big debate. Do people get deciles? Do they understand when you go out in the community? How do you explain them? Do they get it?
Yeah, well, I guess part of it is where it makes sense is it's how do you put history into context. So at the core of any presentation usually is, drag out a district's long-term rainfall record. And then when you start talking about decile 1s or decile 10s, they're the wettest 10% of year. So they normally feature pretty large in people's memory. So part of that sort of thing, I would have thought probably, I don't know, because people are hearing about deciles and that more often, and farmers talk about it in terms of markets as well, like they're just talking about prices and different stuff. So deciles is not just something that's related to rainfall and trying to put history into context. It's also used for other parameters there. So I'd say that there's a fair use of deciles in agriculture, but there's certainly it's not 100% fully acceptance, but where it works is just putting local history into context. Not sure, Dale, what would you?
Yeah, like I personally have been talking to farmers about rainfall deciles for probably 23 years. Peter's probably been going for longer. He can nod his head if he has been. It's not something that's new in the grains industry. It's possibly not as new, but even in the wool industry, there's deciles for wool pricing and these sorts of things. It's not a term that's unusual. So I think what I like about deciles is that nothing else really puts history in context so well. And I think it's up to us to get people up to the mark that deciles are the language we'd like people to talk in. And so if it's not making sense to them, that's a job for extension and communication people to make that apparent to them.
And there's some great work done, I guess, with one of the test products, which was the decile one that Deb and Harry did, and just showing that the full range of options are potentially there in the forecast. It's just that every now and then they're skewing at one end. That was really an important difference from the map product of above and below median, to people saying, oh, okay, that's showing that the answer is in here somewhere, but there is no guarantee which one of those model runs is right. And also not just the deciles, but it had the millimetres of rainfall, which was an important innovation that saying if you're interested in what's above decile 9, well, that means more than 180 millimetres. So that was some pretty clever work. Thanks, Debbie and Harry, in that. I'm not sure what Peter thinks on your point of view.
Peter, your comment.
Yeah, no, I think, well, I guess totally agree with what Dale and Graham have said. I'd just add, when people are showing a map of the last season, they always pick the decile, the Bureau's map with the pink and the red and the blue. And so that's the one they tend to use of understanding that. I think the history ones are a really important part of it, and we've used that in the wine industry to see that we're getting a lot more decile 8, 9, and 10 summers than we were. And so that's that. Just the other thing is, I think that say in the wine industry, if we're talking about a wet summer, what's a wet summer in the Riverland is very different than what's a wet summer in the Hunter Valley. And so the idea of talking about a decile 9 or 10 summer, because on something like that, it isn't actually millimetres. It is actually the fact that systems become designed to cope with most summers. So the Hunter Valley, they're used to wet summers all the time, whereas in the Riverland, they're not. And so when you get a decile 9, 10 in both locations, that's a lot wetter in one than the other. So I think that's, if we're going to talk about extremes, there's a real benefit of talking about both quantity threshold and some notion of a fixed idea of where that is.
Yeah, so it raises a question for the three of you. Does it always help to throw out an example in a local context? That's just what you've raised there, Peter. So you say, well, this means that you might make a different decision about planting, or this means, so you're trying to place it in a local context, and then suddenly it coalesces in people's minds as to what this is actually telling them. I think having a tangible example, do you find you use that?
I'm sure, and I think these are not difficult mathematical ideas. They're just words that we have to convey to people, and I think it's just and I'm sure that I struggled with. I didn't understand deciles until someone explained it to me, and I think that we just have to give the explanation. Agriculture understands the notion of risk being relative in time and relative in space. They understand that well. It's just a matter of putting numbers on that.
So a question for Deb and Harry now, from Ian Elliott, and I'll just expand on this question a little bit. Of the 99 models used to prepare probabilities, can we have the ability to review, analyze, or adjust particular models that might have better historical fit for our particular region? Maybe just start with, why do we get different results when we run the model 99 times? And then let's work from there into, because I think there's a bit of a conflation of the 99 model runs of one model versus multiple models. I'll let you go with it. Maybe Deb and Harry.
Yeah, that's right. So the 99 model runs or 99 forecasts that we produce all come from the same model. They all come from Access S. And the reason we do multiple forecasts is because of, if you've heard of chaos theory or the butterfly effect, basically, we don't know exactly how the future is going to evolve, and very, very small differences at the start of the forecast can actually make the forecast diverge. So our 99 forecasts, as I think Graham mentioned, are actually all they're all plausible outcomes. So you couldn't really do what you were saying for our particular situation where we're running these 99 from the same model. So moving away from that, you could also get forecasts that are generated from another modelling system, so a modelling system that's run in the UK or the US, their forecast might be a little bit different from our forecast because the models might have slightly different formulations, and so that by comparing them, you would get an idea of differences or uncertainties in the future because of our uncertainties in how we model the weather. Harry, did you want to add anything?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say it in Peter Heyman words. So we have a single model, and we know that there's something unusual in the current state of the climate, like we have a La Nina developing or we have an Indian Ocean dipole developing, but we don't know exactly how much, how strong that effect's going to be. And so you can imagine you're going to roll a dice or a die, and I told you the die, you've slightly weighted 6 more than the other numbers, but you don't know how much I've weighted it. So if you roll it 99 times, you probably get a pretty good handle on how much weight there was on 6. You maybe increase the chance of getting a 6 twofold or something. So that's what happens with the forecast model. We know that there are drivers in the climate that are going to push us towards warmer temperatures or cold temperatures or wetter conditions. And sometimes the push is really hard and sometimes it's not. But there's all this weather noise going on. And so we run the model 99 times, a single model 99 times, where we somehow try to sample uncertainty in that initial state that then, as Debbie said, is going to grow by these nonlinear interactions and give you some spread at the end. But yeah, so it's a single model. Now it is possible that you could access multiple models from around the world and somehow, with some post-processing, come up with, some combination of all the models that maybe gives you a better forecast. And these things have been tried in other places places. There's a really famous operation in the state of Florida, in the United States, where farmers actually pay this company big money to actually put together output from 7 or 8 different models, and every single grid point, say in Florida, is a different combination of models, and it's completely overkill, but people buy into it. So anyway, so you could do it, but I think, what we're doing is a trusted method, and we know, we run our own model and we know what the strengths and weaknesses of the model is. But yeah, so it's just a single dice that we're rolling that's been weighted. We don't.
But to some extent, Dale and Graham, you do some of that work, don't you? Sorry, Graham, you were going to say something.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the probabilities bit about the forecast, that's what's important about making sure people understand what is being said, because I do know, there is all sorts of astrologists and other people who claim to know what will happen in the future. And of course, beware of anyone who says they know what will happen exactly in the future. So, but we're not flying blind, whether that's with markets or shares or with the weather. And there's some good physics, and we're knowing more about the drivers of wetter seasons and drier seasons in Australia than ever before. So that's good. I think what's been valuable in this project is the chance to connect up a bunch of people from, what you can and can't tell about what climate models can and can't do. And then, people at the user end just going, well, that's really good, but it doesn't tell me exactly what's going to happen. So we need to work out, when does that change our decision? And some of the things with the forecast stuff, and whether you move to the multi-week or the multi-month and seasonal stuff, some of this stuff is just part of the art of working out when is the model telling us something just to be wary of. And then it's been interesting as you watch the forecast change over a week. Some people involved in the project are saying, yep, look at that little sort of potential bit of heat has been there for a bit. And it's just that forearmed message, which is about keep an eye on it. See how the forecast is in a couple of days' time. Is that still there? If that's still there and it has consequence to what you're producing or growing, then you've got a hand on the lever just to think about, well, if that heat does turn up, if that 3 week sort of bit of heat does turn up, that'll really affect the production of our particular product. So I think it's just about how you read, So and some seasons and weeks and some forecasts pop out something that's worth paying attention to, and other times there's nothing much there to look at. So that's more part of how the users engage, I think, which has been really interesting.
Great. Jenny O'Sullivan's given us a great generic question, which I'll put you all on notice for. Any surprises from the project? And Russell, I'll throw that to you as well. Not immediately, but give you a few seconds to think about it. But I mean, are there any surprises? And Harry, this is not that little circle in northwest Western Australia. I think we'll leave that one alone because we know that irritates you. But are there any surprises that have come out apart from that?
Well, so I'll just mention the one that's already been mentioned. I think the sort of our discovery, which built on other people's findings, of the potential role of the stratosphere for driving extreme conditions, especially in Eastern Australia in the spring and early summer, was a real surprise, because our background in doing seasonal prediction comes from thinking that the predictability arises from El Nino or the Indian Ocean dipole, slowly varying temperatures in the tropics, surface temperatures in the tropics is the main source of seasonal predictability. And then to find that just how important the stratosphere can be. Now, of course, it's not always important. There's sort of a window of opportunity. But I think that's, for us, scientifically, that's probably the biggest surprise, is just that there's so much predictability that sometimes is arising in the stratosphere, and we know we can do better because we don't actually have the best representation of the stratosphere.
Yeah, in some ways that event was quite timely for the project, wasn't it?
It couldn't have been better luck,
Yeah, I was going to say that's the surprise, because I mean, a lot of the work was, done. There was obviously the event that happened last year, but a lot of the research, we'd done the research before that. Harry and his team done research before that. So then, it was suddenly this great case study.
Yeah, so I shouldn't say better luck, but it was at least promote the science. There was good timing.
Yeah, and Deb, your point's made, because a lot of projects we're involved in, it's not just the information from that project standalone that actually is brought to bear. It's a whole string of research leading up to that we bring to bear. Any other surprises that anyone comes to mind?
I think just to sort of balance out the real success was an emphatically wet forecast for July, followed by a rather dry July. A surprise was just how prepared people were to shoot the messenger at a meeting that I went to on the Eyre Peninsula and said unkind things to me. So,
to be fair, it's got wet since then.
Pardon?
But to be fair, it's got wet since then.
Well, we had a very wet April. So if we look at this season, this April to October season for grains industry for the southern will go down as a good season, as a median. But the April rain was already known when people were making their decisions, and the forecast was very emphatic for the wet winter. And yes, it rained in October, and that was fantastic for most of the grains belt, except for the people who were harvesting. And that's some of the people who were unkind to me. So I think, but I think this goes to the point about the dice and the forecast, that the notion that there were some ensemble runs that were going dry from the forecast in the beginning there is important. And the other important aspect is that with these dynamic forecasts, it backed off that dry July through June. So actually the need to keep an update was a really important, to keep updated with the dynamic forecast. And yeah. I mean, I think Harry once used this notion of using the forecast to forecast the forecast. So you're sort of using the forecast to give you information about what you're going to get into the future and so on, and updating there. So that's an important learning from that.
So Peter and Dale, I think you'll be applicable. I've just offered to answer Mary Goodacre's question in the chat. Have a look at it because I think it follows on from what you were saying. But Russell, you were about to say something there?
Oh, I think there's a couple of things. One's an observation, Rich, and the observation is that there is real power in collaboration across a multidisciplinary team, and that's been one of the real benefits and bonuses, I reckon, coming out of Forewarned as Forearmed. The surprise to me, apart from Harry's one, and it blows my mind to think about, the warming in the stratosphere above Antarctica can have an impact on the weather in Eastern Australia. It's the power of science is terrific. But the one other surprise that's got me really interested is the stuff that has been done on the risk management and rapid climate decision making that Peter and yourself and Anne-Marie and Barry have been involved in. That's really good work over and above the forecasts that are coming out from the Bureau. It's going to be really important, I think, as well.
Yeah, it's really important to be able to have some sort of way in which to take product through to decision. And I think that's some of the work that, Graham, Peter, Dale are doing for us is what's that translation in the middle. And that was the design of Work Package 4, really. Kate, anything from your side that you wanted to raise?
No, Rich.
Okay, that's fine. Sorry, Graham.
I can, Richard. I was going to just say, because Kate's done a great job with the community of practice, and I shouldn't be surprised, but what's been terrific has been how many other people across the country are doing some pretty fascinating stuff on climate and in terms of the climate risk element. So the community of practice that Birchip's been bringing together, that's been a fantastic for a lot of us who work in agriculture but don't get to hear what's happening in the other states and across the other industries. And it's a great the community of practice is a great place where people share what they've been doing, and a lot of cross pollination of ideas. So I think that's been really valuable. And so well done, Kate. And the numbers are growing, but it could grow substantially from here, because there are a lot of people that are increasingly, trying to work out, well, what's happening, what's on offer nationally, and what could we apply to our particular district that might be useful, and what's already there. So just sharing that's been a really valuable thing.
Agreed. Yeah. We'll come to Mary's comment if you can read it there. I'll read it out. Farmers rely on weather forecasts and yet remain sceptical. What are the best bet approaches coming from Forewarned is Forearmed to address this healthy skepticism and build farmer confidence in incorporating forecasts into seasonal decision making on farm? Or is it healthy just to remain sceptical? Who'd like to take that one on? Dale, you seem to be ready.
I'll have a crack first, Richard. It's so we see a lot of farmers making decisions on seasonal climate forecasts in the grains industry in April, for instance, at a time we know we haven't got the best skill and the climate's in a state of flux, and it hasn't really shown its hand most years as to what it might be going to do going on. And so it's quite surprising to tell people that isn't a great time to be doing that. That's actually a bit of a surprise for them often, to hear about that kind of what we call the autumn predictability barrier. But what's interesting is that people say they're sceptical, and Peter was talking about this as well, but earlier this year or mid this year, but they're still listening, even though they say they're not, and they're clearly using it to colour their judgment, so that when it goes wrong, they're not happy. And it's just this nature of dealing with probabilistic information, I think, that sometimes it's not going to be right. And sometimes it's bang on the money. I think it's been interesting, at least in Victoria the last couple of years, the models have done a reasonable job at picking some, wetter 2016, a drier 2019, even some of the ones in the middle of the year, the other years. I think farmers have been getting some confidence. They were telling me the models are getting better, Dale. And all the while in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I don't think the models change much. It's just the nature of those climate systems in those years perhaps gave an earlier signal, and they turned out to be the way they went. And lo and behold, this year, there's been talk of a La Nina that has finally arrived, and yet we had a really dry November, which was predicted to be wetter as well. So we've still got people struggling, I think. I think your question about the surprise, I think the surprise for me, and given this was the nature of the project, was to get some value out of the climate model in weeks 2, 3 and 4 for our extremes. I think that has been the surprise, because, I probably psyched myself into thinking that after day 7 or day 8, all bets are off. There's nothing to see here from any model. But that has been a healthy surprise, I suppose, that we have some skill going into those weeks 2, 3 and 4 for our extremes.
Anyone else from the panel want to continue that? Peter?
I just say, really, growers should, anybody telling you anything about the future, you should be skeptical. The great thing about this information is it's given in probabilities, and that gives you, if you can actually look at those probabilities and look at those decile bars that Graham and Dale showed, that shows there's a spread there. I mean, Laplace said probability refers in part to our knowledge and in part to our ignorance. You've actually got people telling you a really rich bit of information, which in agriculture we need to work out how we use that. That's a lot better than most other things that people are telling, economists and other people are telling you about the future. Here they're giving you probabilities and a spread.
Yeah, that's right. If I can, Richard, it's important to be skeptical. I do know there is frustration with some farmers about wanting more emphatic forecasts, and the journey into probabilities is frustrating. And there is a market out there for people who do give emphatic forecasts, but based on moon sunshine interactions and all sorts of gobbledygook, which is sort of basically refer to, you might as well read your star sign and go with that. And part of the thing about some of the understanding what forecasts can and can't do is a really cart of equipping Australian agriculture for the future. Because whatever happens with climate and climate change and more extremes, we're still going to be relying a lot on in making sure we're understanding the weather forecast and then the multi-weeks and when there's something that's giving us flagging some signals that, listen, there's something here you want to keep an eye on, that's as good as we've got. And so I think that's part of the value here. And I certainly have discussions with farmers, some that say, well, I don't know how to trust seasonal forecasts, so we don't use them much, but they have a very good plan for at least looking at what happens for decile 1, what happens to decile 10, and having hands on the lever to play the season as it unfolds. And so that's a key bit about some of the decision bit, is that all of this doesn't ride on a perfect forecast. This is just about making sure people are equipped and can read the play of the season and make the most upsides of when there's plenty of rain around, and then to sort of hedge their risks a bit when there's a little bit of when the dice is a bit more loaded to the drier end of the scale. So I think that's the nuance of how it's used is a really key bit.
Yeah. And I just opened up another comment there that you can read from Griffith Young, another way of showing the analogy. Well, we're about on time. So anyone with final comments before we wrap this up and thank everybody?
Richard, I have a comment for Kate, or a question to Kate.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the things we did in the community of practice is Andrew Watkins and I did this forecast discussion. I don't know how big the audience was for that. It was probably less than 10, I think. And I guess my question is, looking forward, do we, how useful was that? And should we try to build that in? Should we try to formalize that or build that in to make sure it keeps going in the future?
I think for those that attended and were able to listen to the recording, it was very, very valuable. And there's quite a few head shakings there from Dale and Graham. And I definitely think it's
shaking up and down. Yeah.
Right, but I could have just been speaking to Dale, no problem. We could have just phoned each other.
Kate, you want to? You're basically saying you agree it should continue.
Yeah, I am. I think it should continue, and something we should potentially formalize and maybe have a regular segment in the community practices, a sort of either maybe a snapshot at the end of each meeting or something every 2 months or something, where we do get Andrew or Harry to come along and give a bit of an update there.
Great. Those who were shaking their heads, Graham, do you want to?
I think I value the exclusivity of it, Harry, because it's not everyone's getting the benefit of getting you and Andrew on the end of the phone, and it's just the gold nuggets that come out of both of your mouths for extension purposes for ourselves, where you get to have some better intel and explanation of what the heck's going on out there, or the very best things we get to hear about where you're uncertain and where you don't know what's going on, and it's sort of in some respects showing your weaknesses. I think there's great strength in that, because it proves that this stuff isn't all, we don't know everything.
That's a key
it's
bit.
The humanity, I think, of it that I value, Harry.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's there's a lot of trust in the discussion, but I know, like any forecast, and even if it's market forecasts and stuff, that the direction is one thing, but it's really your trust in making a decision from any forecast is around how much you understand why are they saying that, or why are they expecting something to drop, the market to drop, or rainfall to be drier. And that sort of commentary behind the forecast is really important. And sometimes in our discussions with Harry and Andrew, we'll hear things that we're saying, oh, that's why there's more confidence around saying, yeah, have a look at this, what's just changed in the Indian Ocean. And you're thinking, okay, that makes sense. Other times it's just saying, we're not really sure why the model's doing that. It's just, that's what it's doing. And I think sometimes that can help you, because that's to do with sort of an inherent confidence between the vibe. Each season is different. They don't repeat, but there are different times when you're sort of picking up that, I think this is the planets are aligning here for increased chance of wetter or dry. So that's pretty useful. It's certainly helpful for Dale as he's about to, crunch the brake and
the timing's always excellent.
Great. Well, Harry, I think we'll be back to you, and we won't let you off the hook. I think we'll have to hear more. Russell, any final words as we close? I think we've got to time now, so we probably need to wrap it up. And
yeah, no, just to thank everybody for coming along, and I'd particularly like to thank Anne-Marie for organising these 7 webinars. The genesis of it was that we were going to have a conference in April, end of March, early April in Adelaide with Crispy, where FWFA had an afternoon session to expose all of the workings in this area. That fell over, of course, because of COVID. And Anne-Marie, thank you very much for stepping up to the plate and organising these webinars. They've been exceptionally well received, and I think it will be a legacy on the PICC website as well for people to have a look at.
Yeah, so just on that, everyone, this presentation was recorded. So if you need to come back to it or refer people back to it, it will go up on the project website, on the PIC website. Previous webinars are stored on that PIC website as well, so you can go back and listen to any one of them if you wanted. Following the close of this webinar, there'll be a short survey. We would really appreciate it if you took the time to fill that out so we can inform how to design future webinars and how to structure them. And finally, thank you to the speakers, Russell, Dale, Kate, and Graham as the speakers, and to the panelists, Harry and Deb and Peter. Thank you very much for your time today. And thanks everyone for attending.
Rich, thanks very much.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thanks.